This week I realized something about myself. A part of me that I thought I left behind many years ago is actually still very much alive and is showing up in my business in ways that even I didn't expect. Hi, I'm Jennifer Bright, Chief Financial Storyteller at Bright Ledgers, and I help service based business owners understand the story behind their numbers and help them build a business that supports the life that they want to live. So, something that clicked for me this week, and I want to share this because I think a lot of us experience this in our lives. When I was younger, let's say late teenage years, early 20s, I was very fascinated, probably to the point of obsession. I was very fascinated with technology, computers and systems and automations. And I loved trying to understand how things were built and how they worked. And the interesting part is that I didn't grow up, with a lot of access to technology. The environment that I grew up in just didn't expose me to in the same way that some of my peers were exposed. And when I went to college, a friend of mine, she was very well versed in using a computer and email and all of that, and I was just fascinated. She taught me a lot. So I actually, funny thing is, I went to college. I went to the University of Michigan and enrolled in the College of Engineering, and I was going to be. My intent was to be a computer engineer. And if you'd asked me and what a computer engineer did, I didn't really know exactly. I knew that I wanted to be an engineer, and I love computers, so computer engineering it was. But life has a funny way of, you know, moving you in a different direction. And I say in the direction that you're meant to be. A lot of people that have degrees and they're not working in the field that their degree is in. So, life takes you where you're supposed to go. And I ended up in the accounting industry, and that's where I built my professional life. And, I realized that that's where I was meant to be. But I say that to say this week, I love you know even understanding how numbers work. I say that numbers are like letters, and then those numbers make data, and that data is are the words that those letters create, right? And then the data tells a story. So just like words, you can write words and tell a story. And that's simply why what I do is called financial storytelling. I love to understand the story that the numbers are telling you about your business. It tells you if your business is working, tells you what's not working, what needs to change, where you might need to pivot. And so I really still am fascinated with how things work, right? So I have been doing some automations, and I do a lot of work in Excel. And lately, for instance, I was working on a 13-week rolling cash flow forecast. And when I was doing it in Excel, and it was not saving the historical data. And if you know the historical data also tells a story. It tells you trends, and so I needed it to be able to save that without with rolling forward, but be able to save that information, the historical information. So I had to figure out how to automate that. So I used AI to help me automate that and create a true rolling forecast. And I went down a rabbit hole. I was working on that for some hours, and I was using this. I wanted to use this in my business, but I was also building one for a client. And when I stepped back and I finished, I felt a little guilty because I had some other work that I needed to get done, and I had gone down this rabbit hole on this one thing. It was important. It was important to me, and I felt like it was important to the work that I was doing. But I felt like, did I have to do that right now? And I started to feel a little guilty, and I was like, yeah, yeah, my dogs can are seeing me feel guilty. But I still felt a little guilty, and I went and I said, what do I do with this? Like, should I not do this? And I went to my strategic partner, ChatGPT, my boy Strat, And I wanted to figure out how I could balance the two. How do I balance um, feeding my passion for automation and creating efficiency with meeting the deadlines of work that I need to do or something like that, and not feel guilty about it. And what I realized is that as I'm building this plan to be able to balance the two, they're related. I'm not just building apps and automations and enhancing, spreadsheets and worksheets and things that I do for the sake of it. I'm actually building an ecosystem. And, that is, those are related. So the tools and the apps that I'm building are strictly to enhance that ecosystem. And I had to realize that and not feel guilty about it. They're related. They work in hand, and I can do both. Um, you know, so I really thought about it and said, okay, one thing that I am a novice DJ, and even in DJing, when you are mixing two songs, you're doing it on a count. So one, thump, boom, 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 and then you bring the other song in. You have to know what count to bring that other song in. And so that's even that's a hobby for me. DJing is a hobby for me. But really, it goes along with what I already do, right? It's learning how two things work together. So how they connect. And even my hobby, it has a little bit of something to do with my business. I'm on a counting. You're counting and you bring that other song in. So it's a little bit related. But in this instance, me building those apps, me building the automations, me building the frameworks that I'm building, it's not a hobby. And I don't need to treat it as such. It's not a hobby, it's business. And I can respect that. So if you're, doing something and we don't have to feel guilty, even if you do have a hobby on the side of for work that you're doing, you have to have an outlet too. But I don't know what made me think about that this week, but and why I felt like that. But I have to tell myself it's not a hobby; it's business. And so that's my note for this week. So thank you for tuning in to Notes from a Financial Storyteller. And I'll catch you next week. And we'll talk about what I learned that week. Peace.